What is up, my YouTube friends? I'm always looking for things that I can do
All right. All right. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late, guys. Uh, having some issues with the OBS and the streaming software and stuff. But looks like we got it. So, uh got that taken care of. Let's see here. Uh, Trying to get everything, make sure everything's set up. If anybody's in chat, let me know because I was having some problems going or getting everything set up today for some reason. So if you can hear me, sound off. Just wait a few minutes to get everybody in here and stuff. Oh, let's see here. Just sending my usual things here. In there. There we go. A couple other things here. God, this is the worst opening to a stream I've had. I was getting worried there. I didn't think I was going to be able to get my OBS working properly. But I did, finally. So that's good. How's everybody doing? Hopefully you're all well. I've got lots of stuff going on today. Lots of stuff. Let's see here. Who's doing what? Anybody just hanging out today? It's Monday night. It's chilling. Let's see here. I'm just seeing if I can get some hate followers on here too. Those are always fun, right? There we go. Get some live conversations going on. Got 2 people on. Yeah, so much going on. All right. I was supposed to have all of this stuff done beforehand, before I started, but I wanted to let you guys know what was going on, because I didn't want anybody to miss out. You know, since I was a little bit late, and I would have probably been later, but things are working out. Things are fixed for the most part, I believe. Let's see here. There we go. That should be good. Let's see here. See here. We'll go. I gotta go pull this up. There we go. And paste. All right, here we are. So we got a lot of lots to talk about today, guys. Lots to talk about. Let's see if I can do this too. Oh, there we go. There we go. All right. So lots of crazy stuff going on right now in the world. Yes. Gosh, my hair's all fucking weird too. Oh, what a day. What a day. So yeah. So we got a lot going on. I did want to go over some videos that I discovered with you guys. There's one that's why didn't America become a socialist country, which I think is pretty interesting. Also wanted to talk about how the coronavirus compares to the Spanish flu, and some lessons we can take from you know, our past, and making sure that we pay attention to things that have happened before so that we don't repeat them, and things like that. Also, we wanted to talk about the update on the Freedom Convoy, which should be an interesting conversation. Here, we're going to turn down this light. It's a little bit, there we go. That's more like it. So the Freedom Convoy, yeah, this is getting out of hand up there in up in the northern part of the Americas, up there in Canada. So that's some interesting stuff. We've also got I wanted to talk about my second home, uh, home away from home, Minneapolis, and the problems they're having there with their police. Still, after several problems in the past, we know George Floyd's incident started there, among others. There's still issues going on with the police there in the Minneapolis area. So we're going to discuss that. I'm also going to talk about the Joe Rogan drama still going on. It's getting worse. Like, he's getting called out left and right for stupid stuff that he's done. So then we're going to talk about the GOP a little bit for two reasons. They've got, first of all, they're trying to legitimize the January 6th attack as political discourse, or legitimate political discourse, which is sounds like them. I mean, I'm not surprised. And then I also wanted to talk about how they basically were able to push through a congressional map in Alabama in the Supreme Court, which dilutes the power of black voters significantly. So we knew they were trying to do that. Also, Facebook may be dying. I mean, it's doing some crazy things right now. It's losing viewership, or losing regular users more than it has in the whole life of Facebook. So that's something that may change the paradigm in the United States as well as the world. Let's see here. Oh, also, Trump made some racist remarks. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Jordan Peterson some more, which should be interesting. And then that's about it. We have some video games we're going to do later, possibly, and then we're also going to discuss or maybe possibly get on a debate panel with Primecayes. I'm not sure. It's been kind of a crazy week about that. I'll just see how I feel by the end of the night, but it's a definite possibility, right? So why don't we go ahead and drop the intro? We'll get started here. All right. Yeah. All right. Lots of fun stuff. Man. How's everybody doing? This is Qizmhet. That is not my real name, but it is my name on here. And we've got lots of interesting things that we're going to go over today. Hopefully everybody's doing well. Hopefully you're enjoying your Monday evening, morning, wherever the heck you're at. If it even is in fact Monday for you anymore. So let's go ahead and see what we have going on here today. We're going to go over some stories. I'm not sure what you guys are interested in seeing first. I know that I kind of wanted to go over the information about Minneapolis right now in their police system. This is quite disturbing to me that this continues to happen. Mainly because I have a lot of good friends in Minneapolis, and I have a very big attachment to that city. I go there on occasion. Probably like once a year. And typically, unfortunately, it seems like the police there are not doing their jobs to the best of their ability. That's an understatement. They're killing people. They're killing people on a pretty regular basis. And it's a little disgusting. So we are going to go over that and talk about it. Hi, AL. How you doing? And so let's go ahead and take a look at this, shall we? Let's see. So Minneapolis City Council to review no-knock warrants in the wake of Amir Locke's killing. So for those of you who don't know, Amir Locke was just recently wrongfully gunned down by the police in a no-knock warrant in the city of Minneapolis. The horrible thing, I mean, it's all horrible. They shouldn't have done it anyways, but it wasn't even him that they were looking for. It wasn't him that they were trying to apprehend. And it didn't seem like they were trying to apprehend anybody because they came in guns blazing. And this is pretty sad. It's pretty sad stuff here. So let's take a look. I want to show you this video. Now, I have to give you a trigger warning. This is graphic. It's a bit graphic. The man just woke up, and apparently they said he had a gun, but the thing is there were people with guns breaking into his house, and he had no reason to believe that there should be people breaking into his house with guns. And so therefore, in America, you're allowed to have a legal gun in your home for protection. And instead of him being protected by that gun, it is part of the reason that the cops gunned him down. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. And I'm sorry, it is graphic, guys.
Newly released body cam video shows Minneapolis police executing an apparent no-knock search warrant and fatally shooting a black man.
Executing a black man, you should just say that.
Inside an apartment 2 days ago. Tragically, the victim was not a target of the raid. That's according to his attorneys. We should warn you, this video is disturbing.
All right, before we watch this, guys, I just want to say that this is a common occurrence. This happens in America all the time. And it's not, and they say, oh, it's just anecdotal evidence, the police cams or whatever. No, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. How is that anecdotal evidence at this point? These guys have like the worst training in the world if they do this. I mean, there's a 12-year-old kid that gets shot in Chicago. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Police search warrant! Police search warrant! Police search warrant!
All right, we're going to have much more on this coming up. Omar Jimenez has been more on this coming up. Omar Jimenez.
I did want to see something. When they go in, he's grabbing for something on the table. If you saw that, he's grabbing for something on the table. All right, we're going to have much more on this coming up. Omar Jimenez has been covering the story. He's got some new information. There's a slowed down video too. I don't know if that's in here, but we're going to
for us on that.
Yeah, and raising a lot of questions too about these no-knock warrants, right? We saw that play in the death of Breonna Taylor, and now this is.
And for those of you who don't know, Breonna Taylor was gunned down by the police in her sleep when they executed a no-knock warrant for an ex-boyfriend of hers that did not even live with her. All right, he was an ex, like they were no longer seeing each other. They had not been in each other's lives. And not only did they shoot at her new boyfriend, but they gunned down her in her bed while she was sleeping. And not just one bullet, it was several bullets.
Raising questions as well. I do want to get now to Omar. We've been able to bring him in. Omar?
Yep. So, John and Breonna, basically this happened in the early Wednesday morning hours, and the Minneapolis Police Department, they were executing a warrant for a homicide investigation tied to nearby St. Paul. But now the attorneys for the man later identified as Amir Locke tell us that he wasn't the target of the investigation, and
this young man will never get to see his kids grow up. He will never get to see his family again. His family will never get to see him again. He will never get to experience another joyous moment in his life. He will never get to see another sunrise or another sunset. he'll never get to eat a good steak again. Things that we take for granted every day, like breathing, this man will never get to do again because of a mistake that the police made.
The Minneapolis Police Department says his name never appeared on any of the search warrants. Now, regardless, Minneapolis Police burst through this apartment and they appear to wake Locke up, who is seen in blankets, and a gun is seen. And it is in those moments that you hear gunshots ring out from officers. Take a listen to the interim police chief as she begins to try to explain the mentality in those moments.
You're forced to make a split-second decision.
If you notice, his finger wasn't even on the trigger.
About when it's a threat.
No, do not. Okay, I'm not a threat. I don't have a gun. Okay, don't treat me like I'm a threat. This is what I would call the anatomy of a cover-up. This is unacceptable. I'm sorry, it is. You all had no business agreeing to carry out a warrant, and now you're claiming that's part of their investigation. You don't know. Well, why the did you all sign up to do this in the first place?
Right. Why go in there guns blazing to begin with? Why not knock on the door? Why not have people outside the building, stationed in case somebody runs? They didn't have to bust in this door guns blazing like they're in a third world country searching for a terrorist. This was an American citizen.
Now, a spokesperson for the St. Paul Police Department did tell us that the investigation where this warrant stemmed from, that again Locke was not named in, is still an active one at this point. We know later this morning the family attorneys, Benjamin Crump and Jeff Storms, are expected to hold a press conference where we're going to hear from the family. And as for the Officer Henneman, Mark Henneman, has been placed on routine administrative leave as part of what we now know is an all too familiar department policy. John and Brianna.
Not only that, but if you see in the video, you're gonna take a look in the video. You're gonna see that the officer that was next to the officer that started firing at this man put his hand on the gun on the arm of the other officer and tried to get him to stop. This was one of the first things I noticed in this video. Absolutely ridiculous. Appalling and destructive to the fabric of our society when stuff like this happens. So let's go ahead and go with this. With Minneapolis's mayor imposing what he described as a moratorium on no-knock warrants following the fatal police shooting of Amir Locke, a city council committee Monday will review the practice, which was supposedly all but banned in 2020. Right. They already said that they were stopping this kind of thing from happening, yet here they are doing it again. The Minneapolis City Council's Policy and Government Oversight Committee is slated to hear from academics and civil rights attorneys, including Ben Crump, counsel for many families whose loved ones were killed by police, who will present research pertaining to police procedures and no-knock warrants, a news release said. The focus of the committee presentation will be to gain insight on current policies and next steps to guarantee the effectiveness of these policies, the release said. Council members have invited Mayor Jacob Frey, who last week further tightened requirements for requesting and executing no-knock warrants, to attend. So, too little, too late. I don't know what to say to this, man, because they've already said that they were going to stop this from happening. They already said that they were going to, stop no-knock warrants from being executed. And here we are again. In the same city, they're doing it again. It's frustrating, to say the least. And that's the very least you could say about it. Frey and Minneapolis police leaders intend to meet with prominent activist DeRay McKesson and Eastern Kentucky University Justice Studies professor Pete Kroska, who worked with Louisville police after Breonna Taylor's killing and have spearheaded significant reforms to unannounced entry policies across the country, Fry's office said last week. Locke, a 22-year-old African-American, was killed at a residence. His aunt Nika Gray called on officers to change no-knock warrant policies, saying the warrants mostly affect people of color. And studies show this hands down that's the case for sure. They're mainly simply ways for these police to gun down black people, and so that's never a good thing. Never a good thing. There we go. Turning on my phone, do not disturb. I always forget to do that. See, Locke, a 22-year-old African... Oh, I just read that. Hold on. We stand together and demand this change. Unfortunately, Amir won't benefit from it, but the next person will, Gray said at the news conference with family members and racial justice activists. Nika Constantino, one of Locke's cousins, said her family is struggling with knowing police are trained to disarm and de-escalate, yet body-worn camera video shows officers firing their guns within seconds of entering the apartment where Locke was in the living room and appeared to be waking up. Our family is not naive, so we understand that it is not necessarily a person, but a system of injustice that has killed Amir Locke, Constantino said. It is a layered system of injustice that starts with so many inequalities and abuse. Shame on you is not enough of a condemnation. Racial Justice Network founder Nakima Levy-Armstrong said Fry should immediately fire the officer who fired the deadly shot and suspend the other SWAT team members. She demanded interim police chief Amelia Huffman be fired or resign. So, there needs to be some sort of justice performed in this situation. There needs to be somebody held responsible. And they need to stop doing this to people. Every time I seem to turn around, somebody's being gunned down by the police, and 9 times out of 10, they're unarmed, and 9 times out of 10, they're black. Now, the situation may be a little bit different, since there was a gun on the table and he did reach for it. But what would you do if you had no reason to believe the cops were coming at you, because this guy was not mentioned in the warrant at all? He didn't have any problems, no criminal, no criminality over his head that he was worried about. And people shining bright lights in his eyes so he can't see who they are, bust down his door and aim a bunch of guns at him. Put yourself in his shoes. What would you do in that situation? Now, Republicans and conservatives who are very pro-gun, and I'm not anti-gun, let me get that straight, I'm not anti-gun, but I am anti-hypocrisy. And so you know that either two things are going to happen. Conservatives aren't going to touch this one with a 10-foot pole. Or two, they're going to say, well, he shouldn't have grabbed for the gun, blah, blah, blah. But that goes completely against what they believe. It's completely antithetical to the right for Americans to own firearms in their house for protection. Is it not? It seems to me that it would be completely antithetical to that. He was simply trying to protect himself because he didn't know who was coming into his home like that. Right? So it's just a ridiculous situation all the way around. I don't understand what else we can do or what else we can say to stop this from happening.
I love my son.
So I do know that Minneapolis is in the news way too often for this. I mean, you see things like, well, George Floyd. There have been several other incidents in Minneapolis, St. Paul, that whole area, to deal with the police, and not just there, but around the country. I mean, with Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and many other situations, you can go down a list a mile long of names of people who this sort of thing happens to. There needs to be some accountability held against these people. And I mean, may seem a little bit upset about this. I may seem a little bit like, you can tell that I have some anger about this subject. And that's because somebody in my town was actually gunned down by a club owner during the BLM protests. And this club owner, I actually worked for at one point until I found out how racist he was and immediately quit. And then 3 months later, my friend is gunned down by this guy because he was out trying to fight for his rights. It's ridiculous. And we need to definitely keep up the fight against this sort of stuff in America. All right. That was fun. Not fun, but informative, I guess. So dum bum bum. How y'all doing? Let's see here. All right. And just like let you guys know once again, like I do, for those of you who know me personally, you may see a stream on Facebook, but I don't often get to see the comments in Facebook. So if you are on Facebook and watching my live stream, you should click on the link on my main page and either watch me on Twitch or on YouTube. So that's the best way to do that. Let's see. Okay. There we go. So yeah, the best way to have me see your comments is to take a look on, or to actually go on Twitch or YouTube, is the best way to do that. So just to let you know. So let's do something else, shall we? There's another video I wanted to watch. We're gonna do some reacts. Check out this awesome video here. I wonder if I change this to what that. Oh yeah, that's pretty. Just playing around with the lights a little bit, guys. Sorry. No. Yellow? Whoa. Whoa. Yellow makes me really, really, really yellow. Okay. There we go. Yeah, just messing around with stuff, you know. I'm a little out of it today. It's been a long day. So I want to turn off the heat there because that's ridiculous. There we go. Getting a little sweaty up in here. So, start here. So I don't know how many of you have heard of the Gravel Institute, but they're pretty awesome. Mike Gravel is an amazing human, and there's some amazing videos put on this channel. I think this is kind of the answer to PragerU on the left. So let's go ahead and watch this. This is called "Why Didn't America Become a Socialist Country?" I think it's pretty interesting. So let's do it.
In a lot of ways, America is a strangely right-wing country. No
I know her. That's Emma. Emma Vigeland.
universal health care, no universal child care, poor labor protections. Everyone knows this. But why is that? Well, if you look at American history, you actually find a pretty interesting reason. Unlike other industrialized countries, America never really had a powerful socialist movement. Compare that to Europe. In the 19th and 20th centuries, every country in Europe saw a huge socialist party develop, the Social Democratic Party.
Now, there was a socialist party here in the United States, but it was a minority party compared to some of the other parties in the United States. So,
Germany, the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, the Socialist Party in Belgium. In countries like Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, parties with socialist roots governed for decades. Now, none of these countries ever became fully socialist. Instead, socialist parties and their allies built well-functioning social democratic institutions. It's what they called the European way: universal health care, generous welfare programs, free education, and strong protections for labor. But that sort of transformation never happened in the United States. Now, to be fair, the US did see a fairly strong progressive movement in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. There was the Working Man's Party of the 1870s, the governments of radical reconstruction, which W.E.B. Du Bois called dictatorships of the proletariat, and
so yeah, so it's talking about a little bit about some of these things that happen in America too.
the leftist Populist Party, which won 5 states in 1892. There were even 2 members of the Socialist Party elected to Congress, and in 1912, Eugene Debs, the socialist presidential candidate, received a full 6% of the national popular vote. The American Socialists were successful enough that in 1906, the leader of the German Social Democratic Party predicted that Americans will be the first to usher in a socialist republic. So why did the American left never gain power like the European
Why
left?
did that not happen? I think she's going to tell us, but yeah, that would have been, if only just a couple of things would have happened differently in this world, maybe we would be in a lot different spot.
Did. There are a few schools of thought about this. The most famous view, that of the German economist Werner Sombart, suggests that Americans were too prosperous and wealthy to believe in socialism. All socialist utopias, he said, came to nothing on roast beef and apple pie. Socialism needed workers to live close together to form working-class institutions. It could do that in places like Berlin or London or Paris, but not so much in sprawling America. Even as the country urbanized in the 20th century, it also suburbanized. Suburban sprawl promoted anonymity and atomization, rather than the sense of community and solidarity that socialism needs to take.
So, suburbs fuck everything up. It's, it's something that I've noticed. It's like, I don't know. I've always had a bad feeling about suburbs. I've always grew up in the inner city. I grew up in you know, more poorer inner city neighborhoods, things like that. The suburbs always seemed weird to me. It seemed very cookie cutter, very Stepford Wives, if you know what I mean.
Route. Denser places like the Lower East Side of New York, at one point the most densely populated place on Earth, were hubs of socialism and radicalism of all shades. But the vast majority of places weren't like that. And the fact that there was so much land also meant that workers were constantly moving in search of better jobs. As late as the 1960s, about 20% of Americans moved every year. That rate of moving was way higher than in most European countries. And that central struggle, unifying and organizing a disparate working class, was made more difficult by a lot of other problems. Another source of division was occupation. Early attempts to form unifying working class organizations across different levels of skill, like the Knights of Labor in the 1880s, were destroyed by state terror and repression. There were also cultural and political distinctions that made building a party of the working class impossible. The fact that America had universal or near universal male suffrage at a relatively early date, decades before the United Kingdom, prevented voters from polarizing on class lines. That's part of why, in the 19th and 20th centuries, many of the most dedicated socialists in America were European.
Yeah, it seems like it's a concept that's been fought against by the aristocracy of America for as long as we've been around. You know, they didn't want the king in their pockets, but they didn't want the workers in their pockets either. I guess after they kind of figured out the whole democracy thing, or I guess we haven't really figured it out. It's still kind of an experiment, huh?
Europeans importing socialist traditions from their home countries. It's no surprise that socialism tended to be strongest in immigrant communities, among Germans, Scandinavians, and Finns in the Midwest, and among Jewish immigrants in New York. And all of these difficulties in building a broad-reaching socialist coalition.
That's why all those people are based. They're all fucking based. Like, man, if I kind of wish, I just kind of want to go over to a Scandinavian country and just live there for a little bit, just to see the differences, so I can more accurately talk about it. I mean, I can see statistics and things like that all day, but to actually experience the culture over there and to know what it's actually like to live in a social democracy would be interesting.
Were compounded by the structure of American politics. Even today, think about how many times you've seen a friend on social media begging people not to vote third party because it will take away votes from another candidate. And this difficulty was made worse by the brutal repression of socialists, violence by state troops and private police forces against unions in the 19th and 20th centuries, the first Red Scare of 1919 to 1920, which saw many radicals jailed or deported, and then the second Red Scare of the 1950s, which saw socialists and communists blacklisted and fired. Even now, people who consider themselves communists are banned from immigrating to the United States. But the question isn't really—
See, that's something I didn't know. That's interesting. So communists cannot immigrate here. You just have to lie about it, I guess.
Really why America never became a socialist country. After all, neither did any of those European countries. The real question is why, after the Democratic Party briefly became a social democratic party in the 1930s and 40s, America has been without any party pushing not just socialism, but any sort of redistribution to help ordinary people. That is the most bizarre absent feature of America. But of course, history isn't destiny. Denied opportunity their whole lives, forced into dead-end jobs, facing mountains of debt and grim prospects, more and more Americans, especially young ones, are identifying as socialists. Socialism never took root in America before, but that doesn't mean it can't now. This is Emma Vigeland for the Gravel Institute.
So that's quite interesting. I really like a lot of what that had to say, but also I did want to mention, you know, like this kind of thing, like capitalism, is the reason for racism in the form that it is today in America. Let's see if I can find this. Is the reason for Western racism. See if I can find this, because it's a. Let's see if I can find it. TikTok. Yeah, I'm not sure if I can find it. So, let's see here. See if I can find this. It's just a podcast. There was a video I saw on this. Let's see if I can find it on here. I think that it would be good for this video if we watched it. So, let's see if I can find my lock or my, I guess I got to do that too. There we go. Where are my liked videos? Ah, here it is. Let's see if we can find out what this guy's name is. All right, I think I found it here. Let's see here. There we go. Progressive archite. Let's see. Maybe we'll find it. Jesus Christ. Let's go to just TikTok and I'll find it that way. Ah, I know. Somebody sent it to me. That's what we'll do. Here we go. Found it.
The entire history of race and class politics.
Well, we got to start this over here. All right, you guys ready? So this goes into the argument about why socialism isn't in America, or it kind of plays into that a little bit. And it shows that capitalism is partly responsible for racism in this country, if not mostly responsible for racism in the country, or how we frame it these days. So let's take a look at this, shall we? At Progressive Architect, by the way, you should follow him on TikTok.
The entire history of race and class politics in America. The history of rich white people telling working class and poor white people that their problem are black and brown people. So beginning in the 1600s, that is what happens. Prior to about 1670 or so, there was no such thing as the white race, at least not recognized as such, called as such. That is not what people of European descent were when they were in Europe. They were English, they were Irish, they were Scottish, they were whatever they were. They were not white. Only in the colonies do we become white, and for a very specific reason, because in those early years of the colonial period, where you had white indentured servants, one level.
So this shows like kind of this the pitting, and this is still done today to this day. It's a manufacturing of consent for racism. We always use I've talked about this on videos before. We use boogeymen, or the right uses boogeymen to keep their constituents, their white constituents, scared of minorities and immigrants, so that they can keep control of them, keep them thinking that they're going to steal their jobs and stuff.
One level above enslaved themselves, and you had African descended folks, some of them enslaved for life, others indentured servants also in the earliest years of the colonies. Those people would often see their interests as being common. They all realized that they were being screwed over by the same landowners, the same elite. They fomented various rebellions like Bacon's Rebellion in Virginia, others as...
See, it's just, it was a way to split the masses of the common people, of the proletariat, of the working class, to create a division between them so that they could easily control the masses. And poor white people fell for this hook, line, and sinker for the most part. Not all of them, but for the most part.
As well. And as a result, the elite in the colonies realized that they had to figure out a way to get the other folks from Europe on their team. So they created this mentality that said, you're now a member of the white race. You're on our team. You're wearing our uniform. Now you're at the end of the bench. You may not get in the game, but you're on our team, you see. So then they start putting white folks, now called, on the slave patrols, right? Didn't really give them any land or any real power except the power to control people of color, which is why folks of color say, and they are right, that modern policing traces to the system of slave patrols. And
well, see, this is harkens back to the earlier story about the Minneapolis Police and everything too. It seems to be inherent in policing in this country. There seems to be an inherent racism, a systemic racism. And it derives, and people think, oh, no, this couldn't be true. But it is. It's true. It derives all the way from back then when militias and slave, slave finders and bounty hunters and things like that. Not only that, but after the Reformation, there were still groups, when police groups were being formed, they still have these racist bent to them. So this is something that's been in our history for a long time. And that's why police suck still to this day for a large part of it.
Slavery, and we have to be clear on that because that's the history. Right? So whiteness was created to divide and conquer, to create the notion that even though you might not have much, at least you're not black, at least you're not indigenous, at least you're not Mexican, at least you're not Chinese working on the railroads to build the transcontinental economy. You may not have much, but at least you have, as W.E.B. Du Bois said, the psychological wage of whiteness. And it's a trick that was played during the Civil War.
W.E.B. Du Bois was a piece of shit, by the way. It seems. I don't know. I'll have to look into the man a little bit more, but I've heard him mentioned a couple of times, and I don't know if he's saying those things ironically or...
Era on my people in the South, right? Rich folk, landowners in the South telling poor white folks who didn't own anything that they got to go out and fight to preserve the rich man's property in human beings. Fascinating. Why would you do that? Why would I go fight for your property? Well, because you told me that if I don't, these slaves are going to take my job. No, fool, they got your job. That's the point. If you got to charge $1 a day and you can make them work for free because you own them, guess who got the gig, Jack? Not you. So in fact, the system of enslavement was in the long run against the class interest of working class white folks, but they got suckered. Same thing happened in the union movement. You had white labor union folks who didn't want black and brown bodies in their union because it would reduce the professionalism of the craft. No, fool, it'll double the size of your union.
Exactly, but they didn't see it that way because they were brainwashed into thinking that these people were subhuman, that they weren't worth adding to their cause. When it is all of them in the same boat, the only thing separating them was the color of their skin and a bunch of fucking lies about how that made them different. So it's disgusting how these things are still perpetrated to this day, or perpetuated, excuse me.
And then when you go out on strike, they can't replace your happy ass with the brown folk that you didn't want next to you in the first place. Because when they do replace you with them, then you will blame them, not the elite. See how that works? It's a trick. And it has worked for hundreds of years. It is working on some folk right now. And it is our job to resist that with every fiber of our being. The entire...
All right. This guy's awesome, by the way, Tim Wise. I need to look more into him, too. It's just the thing though is that socialism has been demonized in many ways and capitalism has been exalted in many ways, and a lot of those reasons are basically just the owner class, the aristocrats of of society that are still hanging on even after days of feudalism and the monarchy. You know, they take capitalism and power just got consolidated again. It just took a little bit longer this time. These are things that we need to definitely change in society, at least kind of find a middle ground. Like I said, I probably won't see full socialism or you know, true communism in my day whatsoever, but at least we can find some sort of social middle ground for everybody so that the balance of power is restored to society, or given to society that hasn't had it since the dawn of time, really. So that's all I got to say about that, guys. I'm gonna run to the restroom real quick. I will be right back. Okay, and we're back. Wow. So, yeah, we got through a couple stories here so far. That's good. All right. Let's see here. How's everybody doing? Gosh, it's been a weird, crazy week, man. I had to do some. I'm still actually house sitting / dog sitting for my kid's soon-to-be stepdad, as he lost his grandfather, and so things have been a bit hectic. Just trying to, you know, keep this up and going and make ends meet and live the dream, you know. I really hope that the YouTube and streaming starts to take off, because I could really use this as a platform to not only do some good in the world, which is something that I've always felt I could do, was bring some good to the world and bring some balance to the world and further the conversation of social justice and progression in society as a whole. This is something that I've been wanting to do ever since I was a wee lad. So I enjoy doing this quite a bit. So if you are not subscribed or can subscribe or can like a video, or even if, please donate. That would be big. That would be really big. Again, I'm still trying to find other avenues to increase the ability for people to be able to donate and contribute to the channel. But if you like what you're seeing, if you're enjoying it, please don't hesitate. Like, you know, I'll give you hours of free entertainment. If I didn't have to work a 2 other jobs, if I only just had to work one other job, if I could cut one of them out, I could do this, a lot more often. Right now I'm streaming 2 to 3 times a week. It'll be 2 this week because I have my kid here this week. Also, I want everybody to watch on Friday if you can, because on Friday I will be going on to Counterpoint show. Counterpoint's somebody else, but I'll be going on to Counterpoint show, and we will be having a discussion, which I'm really, really excited about. I mean, Counterpoints has been on Vosh before. He's been on Dylan Burns, that sort of thing. So, and I really, him and I don't agree on a lot, but I think that he's a stand-up guy, I think that he acts in good faith. And so I think what most of our conversation is going to be about voting rights and gerrymandering, redistricting, money in politics is kind of the conversation that we're going to get into. So, and the filibuster and how that's all connected. So that's going to be an interesting conversation. I'm excited to discuss that with him, and hopefully it'll get some eyes on the stream here as well. So we'll see how that goes. The next thing I want to do, let's see here. So I'm sure you've all heard the phrase that those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it, right? And there are some major parallels in history for the world we live in today. From going back in history and seeing the rise of fascism in other places. A lot of people have used the fall of Rome, things like that, as comparisons to late stage capitalism. There are lots of comparisons. But one that I find striking, and that a lot of people don't bring up as much as I think they would in this day and age, is the comparison between the 1918 flu, or the Spanish flu as it was dubbed, and the coronavirus pandemic. See, people think that we're going through these things and that, like, there's this division and there's anti-maskers and things like that, and it's just here that these things happen. But this was something that happened even during the Spanish flu. Maybe not to the greatest degree, or a greater degree, but we have the internet now, so it's easier to spread stupid ideas. But I did want to go over this video that I found from the New Yorker. It's how the coronavirus pandemic compares to the Spanish flu. And I'm hoping, I have not seen this yet, but I'm hoping it gets into some of the social aspects too. If not, we'll go into that a little bit, either during or after as well. So let's take a look at this, shall we? So it says, John M. Barry, the author of The Great Influenza about the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918, spoke with David Remick about its startling parallels with the current coronavirus pandemic. Now, this video is about a year old, and there's another story out that just came out recently that gave me this idea. But I think this would be a good start.
When influenza came along, national public health leaders said this is ordinary influenza by another name. It was referred to as Spanish flu. That was echoed in nearly every place in the country.
And there was the reason it was called Spanish flu was not because it was from Spain, unlike, you know, them calling the coronavirus the China virus, which is a direct use of racial overtones to cause problems, basically, to blame somebody.
The Surgeon General said if proper precautions are taken, you have no cause for alarm.
Now, they said that's in the beginning of the coronavirus, too, because they didn't know what was coming.
They did nothing, and they lied to the public.
Your book describes a a tragedy of unbelievable scale. In the United States alone, 675,000 people died, which is comparable to about 1.7 million. This is in 1918. What are we facing now? How does this resonate with you? Your history of 1918 must play in your head all the time as you're watching television, as you're thinking about what's going on.
A little bit too much, right? Well, you know, they're both respiratory viruses, obviously. Fortunately, this virus is, I think, considerably less lethal than 1918. Unfortunately, this virus is much more contagious than.
Which means at this point, it has killed more people, I believe. It's considered more dangerous than the Spanish flu was.
1918. So even with the lower fatality rate, which we're still not sure exactly what it is, but it does clearly seem to be lower than 1918. Even with that lower fatality rate, because more people are going to be infected, we're still facing, you know, incredibly dramatic, unfortunate numbers.
One of the most chilling moments in your book about 1918 comes when you compare Philadelphia to St. Louis. What happened there?
Philadelphia was one of the first cities hit. They, again, echoed the line that the national government was putting out there. They had a huge Liberty Loan parade scheduled. Virtually everyone in the public health community and the medical community wanted that canceled, except the public health commissioner. He was part of the political machine, had no back.
That sounds familiar. You know, people downplaying it so that they can have parades and shit like that. I believe Trump did some of that too.
Backbone. So the parade went forward, and just like clockwork, roughly 48 hours later, the disease exploded in Philadelphia. Ended up with about 14,500 deaths, if my memory serves. About 2/3 of them died in a 15-week period beginning in late September 1918. St. Louis imposed all sorts of social distancing measures early and had a much better outcome. They did, in fact, flatten the curve.
A question, there seems to be a minority opinion, but it's one that I've heard come up, and it certainly influenced, at least for a while, Boris Johnson's thinking in the UK.
Oh, the herd immunity thing?
Yes, the idea is you let the influenza sweep through the community, the death rate is higher, but you haven't destroyed your economy. Because if you destroy your economy, the downstream effects of that are even worse on the public health, that a prolonged depression would lead to.
But like that matters to the people who are dead, right? Like we should prevent death as much as possible because you can't bring people back to life. You can't undo that. With the economy, you can fix things. You can fix the economy.
All kinds of horrible public health consequences, even worse than the flu. What do you think of that rationale?
Well, I think it's a legitimate question to ask. The question is, what price are you going to have to pay to get there? Right now, I think it looks like the number of deaths that might occur would be high enough that would argue against that approach. I actually do agree with Trump on one thing, and that is once we get past this, I think the economy will surge. There are still going to be, unfortunately, a tremendous number of dislocated workers. You know, hopefully Congress, as we are taping this, Congress.
Now, this was a year ago, so, you know, they hadn't seen anything about the Great Resignation or anything like that yet. But I do believe that the Great Resignation is just not people just leaving the workforce. They're grabbing negotiating power for better positions. And they can do that right now.
Congress is trying to figure out what they were going to do. Hopefully that will be addressed. Something like I heard, Schumer say the government should guarantee 4 to 6 months of full compensation for those who are unemployed. And if we do that, that will significantly minimize the economic impact. And again, there will be demand for everything once we get through the cycle. And we will get through the cycle.
Obviously, the only way that this virus disappears, and it's just real eradication is not
That's not going to happen. This virus is here forever.
Right. Is either through herd immunity, where the vast majority of people are immune in some way, having had it, or a vaccine comes along and protects a huge.
He's already predicted this is going to be an endemic. Like that's what's going to happen with COVID is we're not going to ever get rid of COVID. It's going to be like the common cold. Eventually, it'll get to a point where it's not killing a bunch of people. It still may be dangerous to certain people, but it's not going to kill a bunch of people. But we're not quite there yet. We need to get past. I mean, we need to go a little bit longer. We need to vaccinate more people, and Omicron's still killing quite a bit of people. So,
number of people.
Right.
We're told that with the vaccine, that's at least a year out. Herd immunity, nobody really wants to absorb the losses that come with that. So how do you see the waves of this occurring over the, I guess to be a historian is by definition to have the luxury not to predict the future, but rather to examine the past. But indulge us for this one time. How do you expect to see this in terms of the science, in terms of the virus itself, playing out in the next year or two or three?
If we can, quote, flatten the curve, phrase you've never heard, right? And if the healthcare system can function well, then we will have accomplished a lot. I would expect to see this come and go. We may get lucky. Most viruses do, in fact, in high humidity and high heat, do less well outside the body. So we may get a respite as summer comes. But I would expect to see essentially several waves of this.
Waves of this scale?
I would expect to see up and down, at least several cycles of that. And I would think the next cycle would probably be less, and then less.
You wrote recently in the New York Times.
And this is a year ago, so he's kind of predicting this because Omicron is more virulent, but it's less deadly. And there's going to be less and less people over a period of time, but it's going to take a while. We're into the third year here, and the Spanish flu had a third year too. That kind of exploded a little bit. So we'll go over that too.
Whether we use that time well, meaning the time that we have to get out in front of this, although however belatedly, whether we use that time well will determine whether a month from now the United States looks like Italy, where the virus seems out of control, or South Korea, which seems to have gained control by testing more than 270,000 of its 51 million people. Does the United States now resemble Italy more than it does South Korea?
Well, on the plus side, I think we've instituted the social distancing much earlier than Italy. They started out with quarantine, but it was an extremely leaky quarantine. So it really had no effect. In terms of testing, obviously, we're way behind. You can't isolate someone if you don't know they're sick. You can't trace your contacts if you don't know they're sick. I have a lot of concern. I'm over 70, so I'm a target audience. My wife's over 70. She's a target audience. If you're infected with the virus, it can take anywhere from 2 to 14 days before you get sick. It's important that that point be made to everyone so that they won't lose heart when they think that we're doing all these things and yet the case counts are still going up. There's a real time lag between the institution of any restrictions and any benefit that we see. Real keys to success is compliance. If people don't,
which is not something that is happening. We've used it as a political weapon in this country. So there's no compliance to CDC rules or anything like that. There's half the country, at least 30% of the country, are doing everything they can to not comply.
Heed the advice, then we're in trouble.
What do you recommend as people are trying to live their lives and be as safe as possible? What are the key things that you recommend with your great historical knowledge and your knowledge of what's going on now?
I would say what we are doing, what most of us are doing anyway. The social distancing, that doesn't mean you can't communicate with people. You can communicate over the internet. I was just walking through the French Quarter. People are, stopping on the street from different sides of the street, talking across, and there's actually a good feeling when you have that human connection. I think it's very important.
And that is, I think that's a good point, is that is really important for us to still have some sort of communication with each other, even during lockdown and masking and stuff like that. You just got to be a little more careful. Wash your fucking hands, and do what you need to do to do that, or to stay safe. But I did want to go over some. Let's see here. See if we can find a video on this. If not, then we'll. Let's see here. So we'll take a look at a couple of these. All right, here we go.
Welcome back to CBS This Morning. As Election Day nears, the role of masks during the pandemic has become highly politicized.
Again, when I get occasionally confronted with a person in public about wearing a mask, I say, look, this is America. Be a patriot.
We have urged Americans to wear masks, and I emphasized this is a patriotic thing to do. Maybe they're great, and maybe they're just good. Maybe they're not so good.
See, this guy can't like he's trying to play all sides here. Like when he says stuff like that, he's not being resolute. I mean, it's called the resolute desk for a reason, right? Like he's not being resolute. He's being wishy-washy. He's trying to tell people whatever they want to hear so that he can get voted in again.
We took a look at the way masks were handled more than a century ago during the 1918 flu pandemic and found some surprising similarities.
In the fall of 1918, as Americans across the country were celebrating victory in World War I, the masks on returning troops showed we were losing another war against the so-called Spanish flu.
Even a century ago, masks were controversial.
Yes, and for so many of the same reasons they are today.
Nancy Toms is a history professor at the State University of New York at Stony Brook.
At its worst in 1918, how bad did the pandemic get?
Really, really bad. We refer to it as the big one among historians of medicine.
675,000 Americans would die, nearly a third of them in a single month.
Now, I believe we're up to 900,000, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a lot.
Red Cross spread the slogan, "Wear a mask, save your life," and nurses began to make them for the public.
We are looking at two masks, gauze masks, that were used in the 1918 pandemic here in California.
They're in the collection of the Oakland Museum. Erendina Delgadillo is associate curator.
They're pretty transparent, right? So it wasn't an ideal material, but it was definitely better than not wearing anything.
Back in 1918, this was one of the centers of
probably more breathable than what we have now, but not as helpful.
The fight against the pandemic?
Yes, indeed. This was the Henry Street settlement, and its founder, Lillian Wall, played a critical role in organizing the pandemic response in New York City.
Masks were never officially mandated on the East Coast, Nancy Toms says, but other health rules were often aggressively enforced.
There were spitting raids even, though, by police.
Oh, yes. There was a definite effort to up the ante in prosecuting, they called them sanitary infractions.
The U.S.
See, we don't have any of that. There's nobody being arrested for spitting.
U.S. outbreak had started on a Kansas Army base, and the campaign to stop it was tied to the war effort.
So wearing a mask became a patriotic gesture.
Yes. And if you refused to wear a mask, you could be called a slacker.
What did that mean?
A slacker was not quite like a traitor, but it was someone who was dragging their patriotic feet.
San Francisco was the first city to actually mandate masks.
Yes, 10% of the population was infected between 1918 and 1919.
In just a day,
it's really interesting, the parallels here, you know? That there were people back then who didn't know what was good for them either.
San Francisco Chronicle reported 100 people were charged with disturbing the peace for failing to wear masks. Their sentence, 10 days in prison or a $5 fine, about $80 today.
And then here in San Francisco, there was an anti-mask league that formed in early January. So the chairman was this woman named Mrs. E.C. Harrington. She was a suffragist. She was a lawyer. She put out a call in the San Francisco Chronicle asking for her fellow citizens who objected to this mask mandate, as really similar to the arguments now, actually.
They argued the ordinance was unconstitutional and that masks had not been proven effective.
Sound familiar? Does that fucking sound familiar or what? Man, Jesus. Yeah, so that was like she was like like Marjorie Taylor Greene every time, I
Some
guess.
2,000 people turned out for a rally at the Dreamland skate rink. Other cities would mandate masks, including Denver, Seattle, Oakland, Sacramento, and Phoenix. They were met with resistance, too.
One major difference, it wasn't political then.
There was disagreement between the various politicians about which businesses should get closed down, but the decision to mask or not to mask never became identified with a specific political party.
And although the materials used for masks in 1918 were less effective,
but because we live in such a polarized society today, and they're looking for any reason they can to divide people, they've done it along party lines with the masking now, which is something that is a difference from what happened with the Spanish flu, and is actually way more dangerous than what they had back then, because it's kind of causing an us versus them sort of situation.
effective than those used today. According to Nancy Toms, masks did lower the number of deaths when coupled with other measures like social distancing. And by the way, in New York today, like in 1918, the Henry Street settlement where we were is still very much a hub for pandemic response, delivering tens of thousands of masks and other resources to the community. And one other striking thing, Woodrow Wilson, the president then, there was no real federal response and it wasn't expected. But he did end up, they believe, also contracting the Spanish.
So interesting, and I really
so many
love that
interesting
piece.
tidbits in there. But don't you like the fact that it was considered patriotic?
Yeah,
patriotic to where you're
because it. Yeah, and people try to say that today, but then you had like Donald Trump kind of like I said, downplaying it and making it look as if, oh, who knows? It might be a good thing, it might not be. And the way he said patriotic, you could tell he was reading it and he didn't want to say that sort of thing.
Came out of the war effort, you know, but it all started. The flu started with, as I said, on an army base.
So
and
you're
spread
called
from there.
slackers.
Very
slackers.
Mask slackers, and it wasn't partisan back then, which is also fascinating.
No, there was resistance, but it wasn't partisan.
Wasn't partisan.
Well, so as you can see, history tends to repeat itself in many ways. And this is a particular instance where I think we kind of need to pay attention to what was going on back then and how it relates to things that today, about how it relates to our political climate today and why things are different, why things are more dangerous as far as the rhetoric today than they were back then. And a lot of it is because of that divisiveness that has been pushed in our society by the powers that be. It's interesting. It's very interesting. And I highly suggest you look more into this. There's also some things about the closing of businesses and lockdowns and things like that that had to do with the Spanish flu as well. So it's quite an interesting subject to look into, and you may learn something that can help you in today's society as well. All right. Let's see what we got going on here. Still chilling. Oh yeah, we'll talk about this. So you guys remember MySpace? Remember how MySpace was like the biggest thing for a while? It was like the only thing. Like, it was the you know, kind of had the run of the internet. I mean, some of you may remember that. Some of you younger Gen Z people will probably not remember that so well. But there was a huge social network before Facebook. And for whatever reason, they started losing losing users. They started losing users on a regular basis and continually until one day MySpace was replaced with Facebook. Now, it appears that for the first time in the history of its popularity, Facebook is losing users in masses. And so I kind of wanted to go over this because I find it quite interesting, and talking about history repeating itself, I'm almost hoping that there's something new over the horizon that's an improvement over Facebook, and that Facebook goes to the wayside. I would like to see that. And I would like to see them lose their hold over the idea of a metaverse. Because I think that's something that needs to be democratized, and not just in the control of one company who gatekeeps, right? So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this article here. For the first time in its history, Facebook is in decline. Has the tech giant begun to crumble? As long as the numbers of users keep growing, Mark Zuckerberg felt able to ride out scandals and criticism. He can no longer rely on that defense. Facebook was much in the news last week. Although you may not realize that because it has been renamed Meta, in the hope that bad vibes associated with its maiden name would gradually fade from public memory. Google tried the same stunt with Alphabet, and that hasn't worked either. For a change, though, Facebook's latest moment at the top of the news agenda had nothing to do with scandals and everything to do with its financial results, which were so unexpectedly bad that the shares dropped 25% at one point, taking a $240 billion off of its market value, which in return led to a 2% drop in the NASDAQ index. That's a lot. That's a tremendous amount that kind of went down there. So it's not something to scoff at, for sure. Given that Facebook has hitherto been licensed to print money, so much so that at one stage in 2019, when it was fined $5 billion by the Federal Trade Commission, its shares actually went up, as Wall Street registered that the ostensibly massive fine was actually the equivalent of a flea bite on an elephant. But this time was different. Why? 3 factors stood out from the reports of Mark Zuckerberg's conference call that with stock market analysis: the impact of TikTok, Apple's move to require iPhone users to consent to being tracked by advertisers, and the revelation that the hitherto unstoppable growth in the number of Facebook users has stalled. Zuckerberg's newfound obsession with TikTok must have puzzled many observers. After all, TikTok is not a social network. It is a service that hosts short-form user videos from genres such as pranks, stunts, tricks, jokes, dance, and entertainment. It is owned by the Chinese company ByteDance. It is understood by nobody over the age of 40. Hey, I'm over 40. I understand it. It's not ubiquitous to my life like it is to a lot of younger people, but I understand it. And has taken the world by storm. As a form of Chinese cultural imperialism, it makes Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative look amateurish. So why is it keeping Zuckerberg awake at night? The answer is that TikTok caters brilliantly to a demographic group, so-called young adults, that Facebook, with its aging demographics, parents and grandparents, doesn't seem to serve well anymore. This explains its zeal to re-energize Reels, its ludicrous attempt to mimic the short video genre, and to reprioritize young adults in its other offerings. But the real problem for Facebook is that TikTok is monopolizing its users' attention, which is where the money for surveillance capitalism comes from. So if you're not always on Facebook, they can't always use you to sell things, and so they can't use your information, and it becomes less effective, and they start to hemorrhage money from advertisers and things like that. So that's interesting. And also, I think that there's more to this. I think that there's also the fact that they were embroiled in so much scandal about misinformation and just the shady shit that they were doing kind of turned a lot of younger people especially off from being active users on Facebook. As Ben Thompson, the veteran tech analyst, puts it, the problem for Meta is that its business isn't based on surfacing content from your friends. It's based on engagement and serving ads, which means any service that occupies your time and attention, and TikTok occupies a lot of it, is a fundamental threat. The second source of woe for Facebook is the impact of Apple's App Tracking Transparency feature, ATT feature. Introduced last year with version 14.5 of its iOS mobile operating system, this required iPhone users to give explicit consent for user-level and device ID-based monitoring by apps. Not surprisingly, users declined in droves, and the impact for Facebook has now become clear in the form of $10 billion in lost advertising revenue. $10 billion in lost advertising revenue. That's 8.5% of the company's 2021 revenues. That's a lot. See, you can see how they're kind of in a bit of trouble here. But more significantly, a quarter of its overall profit for the year. 25% of its profit for the year. It's easy to see why results like these might lead investors to reconsider their stock portfolios, but Facebook has had wobbles before and recovered. As a company, it has vast resources of cash and talent. Given time, it might be able to find a way of luring young adults away from TikTok and of navigating around Apple's ATT. But for anyone who takes a longer-term view of these difficulties, the big story is that the company's user base may have stopped growing. The figures revealed last week show that the number of daily active users fell by 500,000, and that the numbers of monthly active users seems to have leveled off at 2.91 billion. If this is the beginning of a trend, it's really significant. So this is kind of what happened with MySpace, is like, you know, there were other platforms that came out that kind of monopolized on people's time a bit more, and there wasn't a model on MySpace like Facebook has with the gross use of people's information in order to draw in advertisers. So that wasn't as ubiquitous with social media back then. So Facebook obviously has a little bit of more staying power than MySpace did, because MySpace was around for, I would say, probably about 5 or 6 years pretty strong, and then tanked. but Facebook has been pretty strong since about, what, 2007? So that's, you know, well over a decade. It's actually, what, 15, 16 years that they've been on top of their game. So maybe it's time for a change, guys. Why? Basically, it's all about network effects. Way back in 1990, Bob Metcalfe, the co-inventor of Ethernet, formulated a law that says the value of a communications network is proportional to the square of the number of connected users of the system. This law has driven every networking system on the planet, and harnessing it has always been a goal of company founders. The trick was to attract users quickly by not charging for services, and to get to the point where use numbers are big enough to make it very difficult to break into the market. Facebook reached that point long ago, and if you want a measure of its power at the moment, try working out what the square of 2.91 billion is. The reason the network effect is so powerful is that as long as the number of users is increasing, the company is riding a virtuous cycle or circle. The more users it has, the greater the incentive for new users to sign up, and so on and so forth. From the beginning, driving growth is the number of users has been Zuckerberg's overriding obsession. It's why he has always turned a tin ear to the voices of caution when the company ran into scandals and charges of causing societal damage. But network effects works both ways. If users start to decline, then the virtuous cycle suddenly turns vicious, leading to a downward spiral. Maybe this is what TikTok is already doing to Facebook's Instagram. For example, Zuckerberg is smart enough to know his position as master of the current universe may be transitory. Sic transit gloria and all that. Which may explain why he plans to be master of the coming metaverse. So yeah, he's seeing that with social media the way it is, he needs to jump ship, right? He's got to get out of there real quick, or else, you know, he may lose his ass completely. So this is interesting in many ways. I would like to see how this is going to continue on, and if this is truly an end to the reign of Facebook in the social media society. I do think that we're due for a change. I think that Facebook, at least in the past, 5 to 10 years, has done more harm to our social framework and social cohesion than it's done good. Now, there are good things about it, of course. I mean, I found my long lost brothers and sisters that I had not talked to or ever met before because of Facebook. Was one of the reasons. And, I've met lots of great people and been able to promote things on Facebook, like my businesses and DJing and things like that. So there are some benefits to it, but like any tool, it can be misused. And if the owners of the tool, the people who manufacture the tool, don't pay attention to where its weaknesses are, then that tool can be further used for nefarious purposes, and eventually that's going to affect the makers of the tool as well. So therefore, instead, I think Zuckerberg is seeing a beginning of the end to Facebook and to Instagram, and deciding that the way he's going to go is to try to put everything he can into the metaverse now. Now, the problem with that is I don't want them ruining another new form of communication. And it's kind of telling that he picked the name of the metaverse, because the book Snow Crash that it comes from is a dystopia, right? It's not a happy place. And the metaverse in there is flawed as well. And I think that we could do a much better job if we made it more democratized. But again, with capitalism the way it is, it seems like they may get a big head start and a big controlling portion of the metaverse with their new company. And so it's something that we need to fight back against a lot too, I think. So, you know, fuck Facebook. Bring something else good along, you know, bring something that can really bring people together, that will really stand the test of time and do benefit society. Bring makers of that product that really give a shit, unlike Zuckerberg and his team. But yeah, that's all I got to say about that. So much going on in the world, guys. So much. Gosh. I may skip Primecayes tonight, guys. My throat. I'm feeling a little bit of and I'm not sure how much I will be able to get through that. So, but again, I will be on Counterpoints this week. He's been on the Hippy Dippy. He's been on Vosh. He's been on several other programs, Modern Debates, I believe. And it's a good opportunity for me to get my foot in the door into a larger community. So I do highly, highly recommend and highly ask and implore you to watch the show on Friday, as I will be on Counterpoint show at that time. So, okay, here we go. How about them crazy truckers in Canada, huh? Oh my gosh, this thing just keeps getting more and more crazy, like more blown out of proportion as far as the people who are joining this protest. It's unbelievable that so many people are attaching themselves to this, when the whole thing, as I've discovered, was started by alt-right groups and Western chauvinists and basically Nazis. As I've discussed previously in another stream, you know, a lot of the people who are heading this up are white nationalists, Western chauvinist types, and there were Nazi flags being flown right next to the Canadian flag in a lot of pictures and things. So it's a little bit scary. So let's continue on to figure out what's going on with these shysters, these crazy protesters who are either snowed into mass hysteria or with an agenda to have people join their cause of inequality and Western chauvinism. So let's take a look. Ottawa protesters defy growing calls to end occupation of Capitol. So there's been a lot of talk about, you know, trying to break these up because they're screwing everything up. I mean, they're blocking businesses, they're causing violence, they're basically just not really out there protesting anything that the government can do anything about, because a lot of it has to do with the border and the US's decision to not let people through without vaccination cards and things like that. So let's go ahead and take a look. It says protesters against COVID vaccine mandates have defied government calls for them to end a 10-day occupation of Canada's capital after a day after the city's mayor declared a state of emergency and promised to get the city back. Ottawa police have described the protesters as a siege on the city, where hundreds of trucks and cars have blockaded the downtown areas. On Sunday, Mayor Jim Watson warned that officials were losing this battle, and a civil class action lawsuit was filed against protesters over the incessant horn blasting and disruption to daily life. But on Monday morning, a 10 a.m. deadline outlined in the class action suit, which asked protesters to leave of their own volition or face damages of nearly 10 million, which is 7.9 million or US, came and went with no sign that the protests would end soon. Even after an Ontario judge approved the class's request for an injunction to end the honking, the protests continued on Monday afternoon. So these guys aren't stopping there. And man, they're fucking crazy. It's cold up there right now. Like, at least we're smart enough to do our protests in the summertime. But I guess that shows their resolve, I guess. I mean, I wish there was more people who had resolved that like that in our country. It probably would have kept things going with BLM a little bit better. I'm hoping things with BLM aren't over, but it definitely took some of the piss and vinegar out of the protests, having to kind of lay low for the wintertime, Dozens of big trucks, RVs, and pickups remained parked in front of Parliament Hill and nearby streets, and protesters showed no signs of leaving. Free food and drink tables, a firewood distribution station, and other infrastructure is helping them to stay put, despite the cold. Most of the protesters seem to be in good spirits, and many of them profess to be there out of love. Oh, so misguided, guys. Look at this guy. Fucking Duck Dynasty right here. Ron, a highway rescue worker from a small community in rural British Columbia, was taking shelter at a disused bus stop. Services have been suspended because buses aren't able to reach the entire city center. I came here for my grandbabies, he said, arguing that Canadians had been robbed of making medical choices. I don't want them to live under the thumb of the government. You don't want them to live at all if you're wanting COVID to spread like this. Like, these guys are so... I don't get their logic. It doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, you're ignoring a pandemic. What do you think that... Well, that's what they do think, that people are lying about the death toll and the dangers here, which is absolute nonsense. Canada has one of the world's highest rates of vaccination against COVID-19. Some 85% of the country's truckers are vaccinated, and public health measures have been broadly supported. But Ron teared up describing an elderly neighbor who died 2 days after being vaccinated. A doctor said she had died of a rapid onset of cancer, but Ron said that he didn't believe him. Oh my fucking God. Okay, so... somebody dies of something else and it's automatically, believed that it was the vaccine. But somebody dies of COVID and just happens to have diabetes at the same time. They're like, no, fucking COVID didn't kill them. That was the diabetes. They had a comorbidity. See the dissociative logic in their brain, like the cognitive dissonance that's going on here. Like, that is the kind of thinking that is not critical whatsoever. The Freedom Convoy began in the final week of January as a demonstration against vaccine mandates for truckers, but has morphed into a protest against broader public health measures. Now, again, what was it? I don't want to say it wrong here. 85%. That means only 15% of the truckers are unvaccinated. And that's what this whole thing started over, was 15% of people who were being against it. And so a very loud minority. Let's see here. So it's morphed into broader public health measures and as a rallying point for both conspiracy theorists and opponents of the government of Justin Trudeau. Swastikas, Confederate flags, this really gets me. Confederate flags, they're in Canada, for Christ's sakes. Canada. What? So Swastikas, Confederate flags, and QAnon symbols have all been seen at the protests. Hundreds of signs hung from the front gates of Parliament, accusing the government of stripping away Canada's freedoms and demanding that people wake up. With temperatures hovering below freezing, protesters warmed up around small fires. One homemade sign on a protester's car appeared to equate the vaccine mandate with Nazi persecution of Jews. Yet you're hanging out with people brandishing swastika flags, waving swastika flags, but you're using the Jews, the Jewish people that were killed, and see, cognitive dissonance. This is complete illogical thinking. A red-haired man who did not give his name said he had traveled from Alberta, more than 3,000 kilometers away, to join the protest. He said that staying on might financially break him, but argued that a slippery slope of worse outcomes would await if vaccine mandates were allowed to remain in force. They're calling us xenophobes, but how could xenophobes be uniting the world, he said. You're not uniting the world. Let's see the delusions of grandeur on top of it. Man, these guys need therapy. That's what they need. Therapy and probably some electric shocks, I'm thinking. Yeah. The protests have drawn considerable support from U.S. groups opposing COVID-19 restrictions and prominent Republican figures such as Ted Cruz, of course. Ted Cruz is the worst, by the way. He's one of the worst. He's up there. Ron DeSantis, also one of the worst. And Donald Trump, the leader of the worst, who has called Trudeau a far-left lunatic who had destroyed Canada with insane COVID mandates. Gerald Butts, a former senior advisor to Trudeau, tweeted, "For some senior American politicians, patriotism means renting a mob to put a G7 capital under siege." Many small businesses in the downtown core of the city remained shuttered on Monday, with owners preferring to shut down than risk altercations with the protesters, who often refuse to wear masks inside. Yeah, not only that, but they've also accosted people at soup kitchens and shelters and other businesses that are supposed to help people in need. On Sunday night, police began removing gas and fuel supplies at a logistics base set up by protesters. "We are turning up the heat in every way we possibly can," Ottawa Police Chief Peter Slowly told reporters. But anger was growing among local residents at the failure of the police and city officials to disperse the protests, amid reports that truckers and their supporters had harassed or threatened locals. That's, again, it's going to get dangerous. I have always thought of Canada as such a peaceful place, so the fact that this is happening, at least this isn't in America where everybody's fucking armed to the teeth. It probably would have exploded into a much more violent situation by now. But this is bad enough as it is. Alexa Reedman, who was out walking her dog not far from the protest, had no patience with the protesters. They should just leave now. She described an atmosphere of constant stress over the past week. You just don't feel comfortable. You don't feel 100% safe anymore. It was initially called a protest, but when people use that word occupation, that really resonates. It doesn't feel like an occupation. You can't just live normally, she said. Or it does feel like an occupation, is what she was saying. After residents of a nearby apartment block argued with truckers on Sunday night over the constant barrage of air horns, two protesters allegedly started a fire in the building's lobby, Jesus fucking Christ, and taped the doors shut. Wow. So they're just trying to kill people now. Ottawa's police said on Monday that its arson unit was investigating. But the convoy has also won supporters. Thousands of people have come in to the protest site on Saturday. The convoy has also gained millions of dollars in crowdfunding support, now being gathered by a Christian crowdfunding site called Give, Send, Go, after the original GoFundMe which amassed more than 10 million, was canceled. Yeah, which GoFundMe did themselves, which they have every right to. They're a private company. They can get their money on their alt-right sites or whatever. Last week, Ottawa police said the crowdfunding had attracted significant support from the U.S. In the few days since the new crowdfunding page was launched, supporters have sent nearly $5 million. Now, what do you think they're doing with this money? They're probably finding ways to hurt Muslims and immigrants and stuff, because this is seriously run by mostly alt-right, like Western chauvinist Nazi types. So, yeah. On Monday, Give, Save, Go tweeted, "Money for what you're passionate about. We won't stop you like others will." Let's see here. Directly in front of Parliament, the driver of a semi-tractor parked in the road was sounding his air horn and revving his engine, sending out plumes of black exhaust. Emblazoned on the side of the vehicle was the slogan, "God-given immunity works best." An elderly man in a face mask walked past, holding a sign saying, "Truckers go home." Like I said, I feel like this is a very loud minority of people. I don't think that this is typically Canadian, the Canadians in general. I feel like this is people's minds who have been poisoned by alt-right ideals, and people who have just been snowed into following this, which is ridiculous, because I'm sure a lot of those people are unwitting and not actually racist or Nazis or whatnot, but they're falling into this because mass hysteria. It's something that happens when you do stuff like this. So, and this is not a good cause. I can objectively say that this is not something that you should support. I couldn't say that before. I didn't know a lot about it, but I can definitely say that now after doing some research. All right, guys. We're getting through it. Oh, let's see here. Oh, I think we're going to cut some of these stories right now. Some stuff that isn't as important. How long is this video? 14:09. All right. Okay, we're going to go over 2, maybe 3 more. I have to decide which 3 there. Let's see here. All right. So, Joe Rogan's back in the news. Okay, he hasn't really left the news as of late. But this controversy is just getting bigger and bigger. And it started off with him spreading COVID misinformation, and then Neil Young and India Ari and a few others pulling their music from Spotify because it is the place that's supporting him and his misinformation the most. So yeah, let's take a look and see what's going on with this. First thing I wanted to show you was, I'm not going to read this whole article through, but excuse me. Yeah, definitely my throat. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do the debate today. Anyways, this video shows Joe Rogan in a comedy special, I believe circa 2009, where he literally was impersonating a child with a mental disability. And this is just one of the things that's surfaced. There was also a video of him that we'll discuss later, of him saying the N-word several times on his podcast. Yeah, let's take a look.
Talking to people that have one perspective.
American commentator Joe Rogan recently came under fire after musicians such as Neil Young and Joni Mitchell asked Spotify to pull their music from the platform in protest of Joe Rogan's podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, claiming that it spreads COVID-19 misinformation. Rogan responded to the controversy in an Instagram video.
I'm just a person who sits down and talks to people and has conversations with them. Do I get things wrong? Absolutely, I get things wrong, but I try to correct them. Whenever I get something wrong, I try to correct it because I'm interested in telling the truth. I'm interested in finding out what the truth is. And I'm interested in having interesting conversations with people that have differing opinions.
Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and more have expressed support for Rogan following his post. Spotify said it will now add a content advisory. So that's the start of the whole controversy as to what happened. Now, let's see here if I can find the actual video. It's not the video. Let's see if it's in the tweet here. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so let's take a look here.
Noah magically got 2 of each animal to come to him on foot from all over the world, and they willingly.
Now, I like the argument against Noah's Ark. I always thought that was ridiculous, ridiculous argument or a ridiculous story as a whole, even when I was a little kid. But the way that he executes his criticism of this is distasteful at best.
They boarded the boat and got into cages, and they sailed away for 40 days and 40 nights, and civilization began anew. 8-year-old retarded boy is gonna go, oh, there's a lot of holes in that story. Let me sit down for a moment. First of all, how big is this fucking boat? Didn't you tell me there are millions of animals? One guy built this boat. How long did it take him? Where did he get all of the wood? 600 years seem a little old for a fella to be taking on a project of this magnitude. The animals come on foot. Isn't the earth 24,000 miles long and 3/4 covered with the water? Wait a minute. What did the animals eat when they were on the boat for 40 days? Since animals like to eat other animals!
So, as you can see, he's basically saying that even a person with a mental disability, in the most distasteful way, would see the holes in the story. It's disgusting. And I know it was, 9-10 years ago or whatever it's the years. Let's see, 2009, I believe, is when that came out. So about 13 years ago. But still, I mean, it just kind of shows the character of this guy as a whole. And it says, I wonder if Spotify is aware they threw $100 million to someone so painfully unfunny that he has to impersonate a disabled child in his comedy as a punchline. Yeah, it's pretty true. So that was gross enough. There were some other instances. Apparently, Joe Rogan has had people say the N-word, or tried to get people to say the N-word on his show, and has said it many times himself throughout the history of his podcast. So I kind of want to go over that. Let's see here. I wonder if I can find. You know what? Never mind. I don't even want to play it. I'm not going to play that. So, let's just take a look here. I'm not going to read again this whole article because I don't want to do another 20-minute segment on this. But some stuff from Vice News here. It says, India Ari, she says, I decided to pull my music and podcast from Spotify. Neil Young opened a door that I must walk through. I believe in freedom of speech. However, I find Joe Rogan problematic for reasons other than his COVID interviews. For me, it's also his language around race. So, what I am talking about is respect. Who gets it and who doesn't? Paying musicians a fraction of a penny, and him $100 million. This shows the type of company they are and the company that they keep. I'm tired. So that's a good point, you know. But let's take a look at Joe Rogan's apology for this. He says, Joe Rogan apologizes for resurfaced podcast clips of him using the N-word. Spotify has reportedly removed 70 episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience that see the comedian using racist slurs. So let's take a look.
Hello, friends.
You're not my friend.
I'm making this video to talk about the most regretful and shameful thing that I've ever had to talk about publicly. There's a video that's out that's a compilation of me saying the N-word. It's a video that's made of clips taken out of context of me.
Okay. My belief is that there's no fucking way to take that out of context. All right. Like you said the word. I mean, I don't even say it when I don't even say it when I'm referring to a song or somebody else saying it. I mean, because the word's just problematic as a whole. So saying this word, like, even in context of oh, this guy said it here. Now, if it's in a book like Huckleberry Finn or something like that, I can understand in a literary sense reading the word. But the 70 times that this has happened, at least, it shows that he liked using the word. Not only that, but it shows, but there were definitely places where he could have said the N-word, you know, instead of saying the actual word, and he didn't. And it just seems gratuitous and leads me to believe that he doesn't care or doesn't realize, or both, the damage that he's doing.
12 years of conversations on my podcast, and it's all smushed together, and it looks fucking horrible, even to me. Now, I know that to most people, there's no context where a white person is ever allowed to say that word, never mind publicly on a podcast. And I agree with that now.
Now that she got caught.
I haven't said it in years, but for a long time, when I would bring that word up, like if it would come up in conversation, instead of saying the N-word, I would just say the word. I thought as long as it was in context, people would understand what I was doing. Like that context was part of the clip we were talking about Red Fox, how Red Fox said that word on television in the 1970s, and how times have changed so much since then. Or about how Richard Pryor...
Obviously, you don't think that they've changed that much if you were able to just spout that word on a subject about somebody spouting that word on TV and talking about how much times have changed. Cognitive dissonance, maybe? Like, that doesn't make much logical sense there.
Use it as one of the titles of one of his albums. Or I was quoting a Lenny Bruce bit, or I was quoting a Paul Mooney bit, or I was talking about how Quentin Tarantino used it repeatedly in Pulp Fiction, or I was talking about how a Netflix executive, ironically,
Quentin Tarantino didn't use it, though, right? It was Samuel L. Jackson who used the word. I guess he did use it. Did he? Yeah, he did. He played that one, the part about I think it was Jimmy. They took him over to Jimmy's house. He did say it. Yeah, it's pretty awful. It probably doesn't age very well. I haven't seen that movie in a long time. But, you know, in Django Unchained, there's a reason for it. There's context for it.
Ironically, used it because he was trying to compare it to another offensive word, and he said it out loud, and they fired him. Not calling anybody or just saying the word out loud. I was also talking about how there's not another word like it in the entire English language, because it's a word where only one group of people is allowed to use it, and they can use it in so many different ways. Like if a white person says that word, it's racist and toxic, but a black person can use it, and it could be a punchline. It could be a term of endearment. It could be lyrics to a rap song. It could be a positive affirmation. It's a very unusual.
Okay, there's a reason for that. The reason is that that word was used exclusively for the longest time to degrade and debase them, to make them less than human, to treat them as part of not the human race. And so the fact that they are able to use it interchangeably with each other now was a form of them taking that word back and taking the sting out of it. Now, we're not there for white people, because white people say it still stings them, right? But if they normalize the word in their regular speech and things like that, and I have some, I'm on the fence about this a little bit. I think it may be overused even in black society, but they have every right to, and I see why they have a right to. I think that taking the sting out of the word by using it within their culture is a valid way of making, I mean, until they get on an equal level playing field with you know, white America, or get on a equal playing field with whites around the world, Western civilization, in all forms, then they should still be able to use that word and not be looked down for it or called hypocritical for using it. And I don't think white people should use it until they are at the same level socially and you know, systemically as white people are. They need to be at the same level. They need to be, we all need to like forget the idea of a white race and a black race, because it's not a thing. It doesn't exist. We're all the human race. But until everybody gets that through their thick fucking skulls, I think they should be able to use it so that they can, you know, basically take the piss and vinegar out of the word.
Usual word, but it's not my word to use. I'm well aware of that now, but for years I used it in that manner. I never used it to be racist, because I'm not racist. But whenever you're in a situation where you have to say, I'm not racist, you fucked up. And I clearly have fucked up. And that's my intention to express myself.
At least he seems sincere in many ways about this. He knows he's in fucking trouble. Like, he knows people are going to keep digging up dirt on him throughout this. Like, he's being pretty persecuted right now. I almost feel bad for him, but you know, you dig your grave, right? You dig your grave, you lie in it. And so I think that I don't think that he's beyond redemption. Let's just say that. But right now, he looks like a major fuck up and needs the wind knocked out of him a little bit.
In this video, to say there's nothing I can do to take that back. I wish I could, Obviously, that's not possible. I do hope that, if anything, that this can be a teachable moment. Because I never thought it would ever be taken out of context and put in a video like that. And now that it is, holy shit, it looks bad. And it's part of also me doing this podcast for thousands of hours, thousands of episodes, over 12 years. I said a lot of fucking stupid shit, which is fine when you're talking about most things, but not when you're talking about race. And there's another clip that I have to address. There's a clip from 11 years ago. I was telling a story on the podcast about how me and my friend Tommy and his girlfriend, we got really high. We were in Philadelphia and we went to go see Planet of the Apes. And we did.
You think he's going back through like all of his like videos now? Like, fuck, what do I have to, like, let's preemptively apologize for this shit. What should I apologize for now? It's fucking like tracking back every single video. Like, he's got teams of people on it, like checking to see if there's anything problematic that he said that he should apologize for, like preemptively before somebody else puts it out. I could see that. You know, sounds like something that he would do. Well, hopefully though, like, he's sincere. I mean, he seems like, I used to love this guy, man. I used to watch him religiously. Well, at first, before he had his podcast and back when he was anti-weed and shit like that, way back in the day, I thought that he was a fucking jackass. I thought he was dumb. I thought he was a jackass. But then he seemed to, like, kind of take some positions and some ideas and some, you know, points of view that I take. And it seemed like he was growing as a person, right? It seemed like he was keeping an open mind, but not so open that his brains would fall out. But now it seems he's backslid on that quite a bit. And it's really upsetting because this is not the environment. This is not the world to do that in. We need all hands on deck to make sure that, you know, there's positivity and truth is put out into the world, right? So I'm back to just shaking my head and being like, what the fuck are you doing, man? So, like I said, hopefully maybe he'll redeem himself. I don't know, but this is bad.
Didn't know where we were going. We just got dropped off by a cab, and we got dropped off in this all-black neighborhood. And I was trying to make the story entertaining, and I said we got out, and it was like we were in Africa. It's like we were in Planet of the Apes. I did not, nor would I ever.
It sounds pretty fucking racist to me. I mean, comparing Planet of the Apes to a black neighborhood.
Say that black people are apes, but it sure fucking sounded like that. And I immediately afterwards said, that's a racist thing to say. Planet of the Apes wasn't even in Africa. I was just saying there's a lot of black people there. But then I went on to talk about what a positive experience it was and how much fun it was to go to see this movie in a black neighborhood. It wasn't a racist story, but it sounded terrible. And like I said, you can have clunky stories about anything, but not about race. And so I deleted that whole podcast, but obviously somebody made a clip out of it and taken out of context. It looks terrible, but it looks terrible even in context. It's a fucking idiotic thing to say. And I was just trying to be entertaining. I certainly wasn't trying to be racist. And I certainly would never want to offend someone for entertainment with something as stupid as racism. My hope is that, look, I can't go back in time and change what I've said. I wish I could. Obviously, that's not possible. But I do hope that this can be a teachable moment.
It's just like, even its apology videos has 4.3 million views, and I'm contributing to that. But, I mean, I don't know. You know, if he makes any money off of stuff like this, he should take it and he should fucking donate it to BLM or a good cause or something like that.
For anybody that doesn't realize how offensive that word can be coming out of a white person's mouth, in context or out of context. My sincere and humble apologies. I wish there was more that I could say, but all of this is just me talking from the bottom of my heart. It makes me sick watching that video, but hopefully at least some of you will accept this and understand where I'm coming from. My apologies and much love. My sincere, deepest apologies.
I mean, like I said, he seems sincere about it. It seems like something that he's really, you know, thinking about. But then, like, you know, he did the thing on Jordan Peterson where he's like talking about black is such a weird thing. Like, the term black is weird. So maybe he's not quite there yet. Who knows? But I do think there's a couple of good quotes here. Let's see here. So he's got some supporters, and this makes it worse, right? This makes it worse. Like stuff like this, like Dan Crenshaw, you do not want that man's support. You don't want that. Carol Roth, I have no idea who this is, but she says Joe Rogan is too successful, is too close to uncovering truths, has a big platform whose narrative can't be controlled, particularly during elections. This threatens too many powerful people. That's some fucking conspiratorial shit right there. If the Tim Young says, if the woke mob is so offended by what Joe Rogan said in the past, just wait until they discover Howard Stern. Howard Stern is, you know, graphic sometimes, but I don't think that he's taken to making jokes about race or anything like that. Let's see here. Glenn Greenwald. So this is all ridiculous. And Joe Rogan, you know, I really do hope that he sees the error of his ways. I really do, because I think the guy's heart's in the right place for the most part. He may be a grifter, but I don't see that. I don't see him like as somebody who would necessarily be like that, as much as what I really think it is he's too impressionable, I guess is what it is. And doesn't think before he speaks a lot of times is something else it is. But basically, he's obviously hurting a lot of people with his rhetoric. And hopefully some of the wind gets knocked out of him, and then hopefully he you know, comes out stronger for it and comes out a better person for it. You know? That's what I hope. I don't hope him any ill will, but he done fucked up. It's just what it is. Yeah. So we got past that. Okay, guys. Now, we'll probably go through this one. This is going to be the last thing I go through as of right now. And we're going to speed it up. So this was a piece of the Jordan Peterson video I did not get a chance to view on Joe Rogan's podcast. But it is on a subject that, you know, I talk a lot about on this channel, which is the, you know, dichotomy between Marxism, socialism, and capitalism. You know, how socialism and capitalism are how socialism is a better system, in my opinion. And the evils of capitalism, and why we should try to change at least how capitalism is used as an economic framework. But this is Jordan Peterson probably making an ass of himself. Like I said, I haven't seen this either, so but I wanted to take a look because it's his ideas. It says Jordan Peterson criticizes Marxism, hails capitalism.
Marx observed that money tends to aggregate in the hands of fewer and fewer people. Okay, the first question is that true? And the answer is, not only is that true, it's so true that you can model the distribution of money in a population using equations derived from physics. Like, it's really unbelievably true. But then Marx said, that's capitalism. That is not true. And it
is capitalism. That's what happens with capitalism, all right? It's unchecked markets. It's unchecked capitalism, which is what we have today. If you think that that's different from the actual meaning of capitalism, then you're wrong, because that's what capitalism is. This is the capitalism that we have today. The construct, the framework of our economic system is called capitalism, and that's what it does. So therefore, yeah, it's capitalism doing those things.
Actually an underestimation of the problem, because if the problem of inequality, which is an actual problem, was as simple as let's change capitalism, well, yeah, let's change capitalism. Unfortunately, the problem is so deep that changing capitalism won't change the problem at all. And in fact, in most of the places where...
Now, there is some truth to that a little bit. Like, I don't think that overnight you would be able to say, okay, we're done with capitalism, we're going to do socialism now, and that would solve all the problems. I don't think that's the case, because there are too many people that are used to being able to dominate others through the means of capital, and through the means of being in the owner class and controlling the worker class. Like, so I don't think that would be able to be done overnight. I think it's something that we need to wean people off of. And I think capitalism makes people inherently greedy, and that greed sticks around and makes people want to fight to keep their ability to oppress others. So I can kind of see that there's some truth there, as far as there are problems that it wouldn't go away right away, but it's capitalism is the main root of the problem.
It's being attempted, especially the more radical forms of communism, let's say, rather than socialism, because we could distinguish the two, and it's important to do so. In countries that became communist, it wasn't like a small percentage of the people still didn't own all the resources. It's just that there were hardly any resources, and almost everyone had nothing. There was still a tiny fraction of people who were the privileged elite. And so, if you...
But that's not real socialism. All right, that's not real Marxism. That was authoritarian communism, which is not communism at all. Whenever there's somebody in charge like that, like the state. See, I'm for market socialism. I'm not for the state controlling everything. I'm for market socialism, ground up, bottom up kind of stuff. That's not what he's talking about here.
Play Monopoly. What happens when you play Monopoly? Everybody starts out equal, and exactly. Yeah. And so you can actually model this problem with something as simple as a Monopoly game. That's actually a fairly good model of how money distributes itself in the environment. And you can blame that on capitalism, but you can get exactly the same result if you have people trade because they flip a dice. So if you took 100 people, let's say give 100 people $10 each.
But flipping a dice makes things random. I don't see how flipping a dice would make that happen.
And then they had to trade with each other. If you flip a coin and I flip a coin, and if we flip a coin, if it's heads, you get $1. And so that's your game. Heads gives you $1. If you play that out till it concludes, what happens is some people lose, let's say they have $10. They lose 10 times in a row. Well, then what happens? At 0, well, they can't trade anymore. So what happens is that people lose at different rates, but if you lose enough, even if it takes you 100 trades to lose all your money, as soon as you hit 0, you're done. If you play that out to its conclusion.
Yeah, but I mean, he's making it sound like there's only $100 in the world, that's the only way that things can be run. You're still playing with money involved into that. It's still being traded on a market sort of thing. There's no goods involved there. So this whole analogy right here has a lot of holes in it.
Conclusion, even though it's random, completely random, the trading, one person ends up with all the money and everyone else ends up with 0. And so I'm a member of a native Canadian family, West Coast Indian family, native family. And this particular culture had a tradition, potlatch, and they had the same problem in their culture. And the problem was that some of the big chiefs over some period of time would end up with like all the stuff, all of it. And that wasn't good because, well, for obvious reasons, you know, it would destabilize the society. That's in some sense the least of the problem. And so they evolved this mechanism. They'd have these big celebrations that rich people would put on where status was determined by how much of that wealth you would give away. Right. And that was the potlatch. Yeah, they had to do it. And back in now,
well, that's philanthropy, right? Like people really look very highly, very wealthy.
No, it's not. It's mandated philanthropy, which is different, right? Like, it's a redistribution of wealth. That's not philanthropy. Philanthropy is giving of your own volition, which most people won't do in this society. And if they do it, it's just to save face or virtue signal. It's not to actually help anything in the long run, for the most part. So, and it's not enough. It's never enough. You know, they're not going to you know, give everything away but like $10 million, say, which they could still live on for the rest of their life and not spend, not run out of money. So it's not the same as philanthropy.
Yeah, well, and I haven't, this might be a biased sample, but I don't think so. And if it is, it's biased towards entrepreneur conservative types who you would think in the parity sense would be the least likely to do this. I haven't met anyone who has a vast fortune whose primary concern isn't what the hell can I do with all this money that's beneficial as fast as possible. They're not sitting around thinking, I need another super yacht. And now look, there's...
Yes, they are. What the fuck, man? How does, like literally, okay, Jeff Bezos just literally paid to have a historic bridge dismantled, endangering history, the historical site, so he could get his mega yacht through the canal. So it's always going to be them first. It doesn't matter.
There's going to be people like that, you know, but I haven't met any of them.
Have you met Jeff Bezos?
No, I haven't. I haven't met Bezos. But
I bet he's got a couple.
I'm sure he does. But like, I'm pretty happy about the fact that he's building rocket ships, and that actually takes a lot of capital.
Yeah.
You know, and the other thing there's a couple of other things about capitalism that are worth thinking about. One is all the evidence suggests that relatively free markets are the best way to make the absolutely poor richer. That's not an inequality issue. It's just that, well, they're not starving, and that's something. We've lifted more people out of poverty in the last 15 years than in the...
Not good enough. It's not good enough. Should we just stop there? And I don't think that he understands what poverty means, because inflation keeps going up and wages are stagnant, and so people are falling back more and more into a level of poverty than they ever have in the past since the 80s, basically.
Entire course of human history.
Can I pause you for a second there? One point that I forgot. I read this the other day, that where Karl Marx is buried, they have to charge money because they have to maintain it. And they need money to maintain it, which is, make sure that's true.
Yeah.
Because it's hilarious. I read that and it was like, I was like, is that real?
My daughter
that is kind of funny.
My daughter once bought me a 50% off Karl Marx doll, which I thought was just ridiculous. And she bought it for that reason.
That's
she
adorable.
told me it's so funny. It was
now,
so funny.
Capitalism.
Yeah.
Funny, real funny. It's because we live in that world. It's not what Marx would have wanted. It's because the world's fucking capitalist.
Here's when people start talking about capitalism, and we talk about capitalism uplifting poor people. One of the issues that a lot of people have in this country is when you ship jobs overseas and you ship companies start manufacturing things over essentially pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like it's one of the great contradictions
Right.
to the progressives in America, that they complain about capitalism on a fucking iPhone. Because if you knew where that iPhone was, if you went down to the factory where that iPhone was manufactured, you'd be heartbroken. If you went further to where the minerals are dug out of the ground in the Congo, you'd be devastated. Like, that's the reality of
capitalism. Yes,
capitalism. That's the reality of sending jobs overseas. The cure to that is a more even distribution of wealth within the company, meaning that the company would have to, and I'm not picking on Apple, like any company, name them, they would have to pay the people that work there a decent living wage with great benefits and health insurance and dental and all the stuff that people want and need in order to feel secure and safe. Give them a great working environment, don't overwork them,
And now how much money? Because the amount of money that Apple has put aside, and obviously I'm an Apple fan. I have an Apple phone right here. I'm not picking on that. But they are one of the richest companies that's ever existed on the face of planet Earth. But how are they doing that? One of the ways they're doing that is by paying people very little to make their products that they sell for a giant amount of money.
Yeah,
so what's the solution to that?
Well,
is the solution to pay people a fair amount? And if you do that, is the solution to pay people a fair amount in another country, or is the solution to pay people a fair amount here where we can regulate? Because we do manufacture some things here, but we manufacture way less than we used to because it costs too much money to do so. But that word too much, or that phrase too much, is bullshit. It's not that it costs too much. It's just that it costs more. And they don't want to pay it. They would rather just reap in profits, and the way they do that is on the backs of poor people.
Yeah, well,
now, if you do that on the backs of poor people...
We could take that apart a bit.
Right.
And so,
but here's my question. If you really wanted to make these other countries, like third world countries, and raise them up and really increase the economy, what you would do is pay people in third world countries where you have these plants the same amount that you would have to pay them in America. Then you'd have a complete change in those environments.
Okay, so we can take that apart a bunch of ways. I mean, part of the advantage to manufacturing things where wages are relatively low is you give those countries a competitive advantage. So part of the reason that there aren't millions of people starving in China, because even the Chinese communists woke up.
See, he's not even going to agree with that. He's like, we've given them enough already. Like, what the fuck, man?
Enough to realize that if they opened up their economies, that free market is nothing different than allowing unrestricted choice among consumers in some sense. When we're talking about the free market, careful about what we're talking. You get to have choice about what you buy. That's the central spirit of free market capitalism. Exporting those jobs stopped the Chinese, a huge proportion of the Chinese, from living in absolute privation and likely decreased the probability of like a broad-scale war. And it also brought the Chinese into the economy, which is a big deal. The Chinese produce more engineers every year than Americans have engineers. And so now we've unlocked an unbelievable amount of brain power. And that's produced...
Is that really true? I don't know.
It's an insane technological revolution. Now, I think it's unfortunate that a lot of that was done on the backs of the American working class. And I think that the Democrats abandoning the working class when they were in that state of privation was a catastrophe of public policy. And also part of the reason why Trump got elected. But it isn't obvious to me that exporting those jobs was a bad long-term decision because, well, you want a world where 20 million Chinese are starving? That's not good by any measure, right?
But is that the only way that they don't starve? The only way they don't starve is if iPhones are manufactured there for pennies on the dollar?
Yes.
Really?
Well,
no.
Well, no other solutions ever work.
But that doesn't mean they can't work. If they work in America.
See, okay, so he's pushing back a little bit, so I don't mind this line of questioning from Joe here. It's because we won't let them. We won't let other methods, through to work. We won't let other countries test socialism without having a regime change war, things like that.
It might
well,
really.
Well, I don't know, Joe, because that's a good question, But for me, the problem with utopian theories is that they're hypothetical. So I like to look at what's actually worked, and what's clearly worked is the introduction of free market principles into poor countries. So, for example, Africa has the fastest growing economies in the world, particularly sub-Saharan Africa. That's really something, and some of those countries are really getting on a reasonably solid footing. And almost all that's happened since the Berlin Wall fell. And part of the reason for that is that continent isn't being riven by a terrible conflict between the communists and the capitalists. And most of the reason the eradication of that conflict has been beneficial is because they're not doing unbelievably stupid and counterproductive things at the policy level. They're letting markets flourish to at least a limited degree.
Now, here's the problem. He seems to think like he's still not addressing the monopoly issue. With free markets, even with free markets, all the money gets concentrated in the hands of one person. No matter what, right? In capitalism. No matter what. So eventually, all the money's going to go into just a few hands as inflation goes up, as wages stay stagnant. And then there's an uprising on your hands. Keep doing it, guys. Keep doing that. See what happens. Eventually, there's going to be an uprising of people when they realize how much they're being stolen from and how much their labor is actually worth.
And people aren't, I talked to some people. I was in Washington for a week last week, and I talked to some people who are working with UN committee that's prime goal is the eradication of hunger. Well, there isn't any hunger in the world anymore that isn't caused by political conflict. Everyone has enough to eat. In fact, it's so interesting that one of the emerging problems, especially among the poor all over the world, is that they have too much to eat. And so we're seeing diseases of affluence replace diseases of privation. And you think, isn't that too bad, these Western diets? And, fair enough, but you want to be fat or dead? And fat's better. And fat isn't optimal, let's say, but it beats the hell out of dead.
Well, how many people starve to death
now
in the world? Yeah.
Almost none. And
let's look that
up. Almost all those who do do it because of political conflict. Like, it's purposeful starvation now.
So someone has put a blockade on ships and goods.
Yeah, to starve them.
To starve
right,
them.
as a political weapon. Yeah.
When you're talking about
the difference, though, is like, even though there's less starvation in the world, there's not as much starvation in the world, there are still people who are suffering in abject poverty. We shouldn't just we shouldn't just stop and say, oh, you know, we hit the best we can do, right? That's what they're saying. We hit the best we can do. No, there's so much more we can do.
prosperous areas that have prospered because they brought in the market, and these companies have shipped these jobs over to these places and allowed these people to flourish. The flip side is Detroit.
Right.
Detroit was one of the wealthiest cities in this country, and hence one of the wealthiest cities in the world just a few decades ago. It wasn't that long ago. When they were in the height of their manufacturing, all of the American automobiles were made in Detroit. Cadillacs and Chevys and Fords, and that was where everybody worked. And then it was also where the union auto workers had established a strong foothold, and they made good money.
You
the
bet.
people got paid a great wage, and everyone who worked in those places, they had a good lifestyle.
Well, Henry Ford did what you said that capitalists should do. I mean, when Ford was pressed on how much he paid his workers, because he paid them a lot, he said, I want to pay them enough so that they can afford a car. And so he ramped up wages dramatically. And that was partly part of his, you could say, self-interested vision, although I think that's an oversimplification. It's like, well, if we want to sell our product.
Well, a lot of that had to do with laws as well that were being pushed by more socialist-minded people.
Why don't we expand the consumer market? Well, those people have to have some money.
Yeah.
That was Ford's notion.
When I was a kid, I had friends that had done gigs in Detroit when I was just starting out doing stand-up, and they were like, whatever you do, don't go to Detroit with a fucking Japanese car, because they will fuck your car up. I go, really? They go, yeah, these guys are auto workers. Like, they don't want to see foreign cars that they don't make in their city. It's a proud city that makes American cars. So, like, there was a thing.
Yeah, well, they were responding to a real threat. You were talking about old cars with me earlier. So one of my friends in the little town I grew up in, this was back in the mid-'70s, had a Dodge Colt, and it was one of the first Japanese cars. And that thing was a real piece of junk in a sea of pieces of junk, because cars in the mid-'70s, they were not good.
They fell apart.
They rusted fast, but nothing rusted faster than a Japanese car in Canada. Those bloody things, you could put them outside in the winter when there was salt in the road and watch them dissolve. But what was very interesting about that, I saw this with the Chinese too, because in Alberta, I went to Edmonton, I think this would be 1975 about. It was the first Chinese trade fair in Canada. So they had Chinese manufactured implements at this display. It was really interesting because it was like walking back into 1945 or 1950. We looked at all these things and we thought, oh, that looks like exactly like what Grandpa was using on the farm, 40 years ago. So but with the Japanese, it's like their cars were junk to begin with. Yeah, to begin with. And then they got to be Toyota. Yeah. And just think what Toyota did. You talked about how good cars are now. Well, the net consequence of opening up that competition was the Japanese got their act together. I mean, in the 80s, particularly, Japan got so powerful that everyone thought it would be the dominant world economy for like 10 years. And they just went from nothing after World War II to like superstars in 40 years. And it's really hard.
That is true. The Japanese did build up their economy quite a bit. I think they're overdoing it in certain aspects now, working their people to death, but
to see how that wasn't everyone's benefit. Now, to your
they're doing that in America too.
Point, when you open up competition internationally, especially in manufacturing, you pose a tremendous threat to the current working class in your country, a tremendous immediate threat. Like, it might be a long-term benefit because it stabilizes international relations between countries that might otherwise go to war, in which case it would be working class people that would be being slaughtered like mad. But it's no doubt that, to me, there's almost no doubt that the freeing of trade worldwide and the benefits that produced were paid for disproportionately by the American working class. And it also raises another really complicated problem, which is when your economy switches to information and services, which is more complex cognitively to deliver, what do you do with people who would have been really good at working class jobs but aren't going to be good in a knowledge economy? And the answer is, we don't know.
All right. So there's a lot there. He basically is saying that the socialism wouldn't work, that capitalism worked, but he, right at the beginning, if you notice, he explained why capitalism doesn't work. He said that right off the bat. So it's not like a situation where socialism has been allowed to flourish. It's knocked down at every possible chance. And there are socialist movements, and there's democratic socialist countries, things like that. But for the most part, it's never been able to be fully realized. And he says he doesn't believe in things that are, you know, utopian, and it wouldn't be utopian, but you know, there is something that hasn't existed really ever. But I mean, what do you think science is? We do this all the time. Like, theoretical physics has made us grow leaps and bounds. There's economic theory as well. What's working now, or what we're doing now, is not working. And for him to pretend like it is, or try to say this is the best we can do, is a complete travesty. Because there is more we can do. There are better ways. We can't just like sit idle and let the woes of capitalism fester to the point where there is a violent revolution or something like that. We need to do something about it now. We need to wean people off of this abject greed that capitalism causes. So, all right, guys. God, I am not feeling well at all. I think I'm gonna end the stream early today, just because my throat needs a break, and I have to get up early tomorrow to take my kid to school. There's just lots going on this week. But please watch on Friday, because I would definitely like to have an audience, a chat available for my appearance on Counterpoints. So if you guys can, please check it out. And I'll put some posts about it later on in the week here, probably Thursday night, to remind everybody, and then one during the day on Friday. So I believe it's going to be about 10 p.m. My time that we will be talking. Let me just make sure that that's the case. Here we go. 2:11 midnight. Okay, so yeah, midnight. So that's Eastern time. So I believe that's going to be, let's see here. Yeah, because it's 11:03. No, so that's an hour. So it'll be 11 o'clock my time. So 11 o'clock my time, 12 p.m. Eastern time, 9 o'clock on the West Coast, 10 o'clock Mountain. Yep. So yeah, check it out. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a good conversation. Hoping it boosts up my channel quite a bit. So yeah, all right, guys, thanks for joining me tonight. I'm sorry I'm not gonna stay later and play video games and stuff. It's just my throat's been kind of hurting all day, and got a lot to deal with. So hopefully we will see you Friday. I will try to maybe jump on Thursday for a bit, either Wednesday or Thursday, and stream then as well. It may be a possibility, it may not be, we'll see. But thanks for joining me. Have a good night, everybody.